The envelope slid across the table like a quiet execution. My parents watched without blinking, and my sister lifted her phone, ready to capture the moment they thought would finally put me in my place. Inside wasn't a card or a check. It was a disownment letter. Their attorney drafted months ago, signed, stamped, rehearsed. They didn't know I'd heard them planning to protect the family brand. They didn't know my father had warned investors not to work with me. They didn't know I wasn't the powerless daughter they'd built their narrative around. They thought they were erasing me tonight. But what they didn't know was, before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been pushed aside by the people who were supposed to protect you. Because what happened next didn't just change my life. It exposed everything my family spent years hiding. Stay with me. This part matters. Growing up in the Langford house felt like living inside a museum where everything was polished except me. Our home sat on a quiet street in a wealthy Boston suburb, big lawns, white fences, neighbors who waved with perfect smiles but inside. The temperature was always a few degrees colder, like the air itself understood hierarchy. My earliest memory isn't warm. It's a dinner table. I must have been 6. The chandelier was too bright, the clinking of cutlery too sharp, and the smell of roasted lamb made my stomach twist. My mom placed the best cut of meat on my sister Lottie's plate without hesitation. Then she turned to me and said, "Natalie, sweetie, you're small. You don't need as much." I smiled politely. I was trained to. I didn't know it then, but that small slice of meat would come back to explain more than dinners. At school, I was the kid who stayed inside during recess to finish science diagrams. My teachers loved me. My parents tolerated me. At every award ceremony, my father clapped once, maybe twice before checking his watch. Lottie's dance recitals came with flowers and photo ops. My robotics trophies gathered dust on a shelf. I had to clean myself. One memory stands out. I was 10, holding a certificate for a regional math competition. I remember running to the parking lot, chest tight with pride, ready to show my parents. But when I got there, they were busy taking photos with Lottie. She'd won best smile in her class. Dad bent down, smoothing her dress, telling her she held the room. When he finally glanced my way, he said, "Good job, Nat. Let's go. We have dinner reservations." I swallowed the sting, but it carved deeper than I realized. As I grew older, the favoritism sharpened. By high school, Lottie was their entire brand. The Langford daughter who volunteered at charity events, got straight A's, joined Model UN, and posted perfect photos in perfect lighting. I was the kid tutoring freshmen in calculus and experimenting with outdated circuit boards in the basement. There was this one Thanksgiving snow already gathering on the windowsills. Turkey scent thick in the air when Dad gathered us in the living room. He handed Lottie a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond bracelet head commissioned for her 18th birthday. When I asked, "Is there something for me?" Mom blinked as if confused. "Oh, honey, your birthday is months away." It wasn't. It was 3 weeks earlier. They'd taken me to Olive Garden. I laughed it off. I always laughed things off back then. Another wound. Another layer of quiet. After high school, things didn't get better. I worked part-time jobs. Barista, library assistant, campus IT help desk. I liked the rhythm of real work coffee steam. Old books, humming servers. Meanwhile, Lottie got into Columbia, and suddenly every holiday became a highlight reel of her life. There was one Christmas when she brought home a boyfriend named Carter, some finance intern with too much cologne. At dinner, Dad grilled him about earnings and future plans. When Carter confidently said he aimed to join an investment firm, just like Mr. Langford, my father smiled for the first time in days. Then Carter turned to me and said, jokingly, "What about you? Still fixing laptops?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Mom cut in. "Natalie's figuring things out," she said, her tone soothing, like she was explaining a stain on the carpet. I felt the room shrink. I didn't know it then, but that phrase, "figuring things out," was something they would weaponize later. College was the first place where things felt different. People cared about what I could do, not who my family was. I dove into data science, machine learning, statistics. I wasn't loud, but I was good, really good. I joined a research lab under Professor Elena Ruiz, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. She saw my work ethic immediately. She started giving me responsibilities usually meant for grad students. Once, After reviewing a dataset I'd cleaned, she said, "You have a mind for structure most people spend a lifetime chasing." That sentence stayed with me like a secret seed. Still, I kept working part-time at a cafe near campus. The hiss of the espresso machine became the soundtrack of my nights. People came in tired, stressed, messy, and I loved it. I liked giving them something warm, something real. It was during one of these shifts that I met Jonah and Priya, who would later become my co-founders. Jonah spilled his entire latte while ranting about inefficient delivery routes for student housing. Priya laughed and said, "Maybe one day we'll make something smarter than this campus." I didn't know it then, but that stupid latte stain would become the beginning of everything that mattered, and the beginning of everything my family would try to erase. Jonah's latte disaster wasn't the only mess that changed my life. A few months later, we were huddled around a wobbly cafe table with my laptop balancing on a stack of napkins. Rain hammered the windows, steam fogged the glass, and the smell of burnt espresso hung thick in the air. Jonah drew messy diagrams on receipt paper. Priya doodled interface ideas along the margins, and I quietly built the first version of an algorithm that could reorganize delivery routes in seconds. We didn't know it then, but that night would grow into a company. What I did know was this: every time I went home, everything shrank again. There was one night during junior year when I came home early for my dad's birthday. I walked through the front door and found the living room, filled with gold balloons spelling LOTTIE. I froze. Mom rushed over, smile bright, asking, "Oh, sweetie, you made it early." I gestured at the balloons. "She got a promotion," Mom said, touching my arm like she was consoling me. "Your sister deserves a little celebration." Dad didn't even look my way. He was too busy opening the expensive bottle of wine she bought him. No one mentioned my research award the week before. I slipped upstairs. I swallowed it, but it cut deeper than I cared to admit. Then came the moment that changed how I saw them forever. It was late past midnight. I was in the kitchen pouring water when I heard voices in Dad's office down the hall. The door was cracked just enough for me to hear Dad's voice, controlled, clipped. "She's a risk," he said. "Natalie doesn't understand the responsibility that comes with our name." Mom sighed. "We can't let her derail Lottie's trajectory. We've worked too hard for that." Then Lottie's voice soft. "Practiced, rehearsed. Maybe it's better if she builds her own path, separate from us. People assume we're alike. And honestly, it's exhausting." Mom laughed lightly, not cruel, just dismissive. "You're the face of this family, sweetheart. We can't have mixed messaging." Mixed messaging. I remember gripping my glass so hard it nearly cracked. I didn't know it then, but that conversation would echo years later word for word inside a restaurant where they tried to erase me permanently. There were good moments in those years, but even the good ones had strings. Like the time I sent them the news that I'd been nominated for the National Research Fellowship. Mom replied 6 hours later, "So proud. We have a charity gala tonight, so I'll post about it tomorrow." She never did. Instead, she posted Lottie's selfie with a caption about grace and excellence. Another mini scene. Senior year. It was Christmas Eve. Snow piled up on the porch. The TV played Rudolph in the background. Dad handed Lottie a new MacBook wrapped in silver foil. Then he handed me a thin rectangular box. "A planner. Thought you could use help staying organized," he said. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I didn't know it then, but that bitterness would become fuel. But while the wounds deepened at home, my world outside was growing in ways my family never noticed. Rootflow, our little cafe project, was evolving. I'd test algorithms between classes. Priya redesigned screens on the bus. Jonah pitched the idea to classmates while waiting for laundry to finish. One evening in the University Innovation Lab, under harsh fluorescent lights, I ran a simulation that dropped fuel costs by 12%. Not 5, not 3, 12. I remember pushing my chair back, staring at the numbers until everything blurred. It felt like proof, like oxygen. Professor Ruiz found me there, still staring. "You realize what you've built, right?" she asked. I shook my head. "You built something scalable," she said. "Something investors lose sleep hoping to find." I carried her words home with me that night, like a secret flame. But even then, I had no idea how much that flame would matter later, or how violently my family would try to snuff it out. The real shift happened during the university's startup symposium. I dressed simply, black blazer, hair tied back. Lottie called it underwhelming when she FaceTimed earlier, even though she didn't care enough to ask what I was presenting. When I stepped on stage, my hands shook just a little. By the second slide, the room was silent. By the final slide, people leaned forward. And somewhere in the middle row stood Marcus Hale, the CEO whose signature would one day change my life. After my presentation, he approached me, offering a handshake and a quiet, impressed smile. "You built this?" he asked. "Yes." "No noise. No ego," he said. I like that. I didn't know then how important those words would be. I didn't know that my family would try to take everything from me just as the world finally saw me clearly. I didn't know that the moment they pushed me out would be the same moment someone else finally pulled me in. But the truth is, every bruise, every cold dinner, every forgotten birthday, it all led here. And it was only the beginning. Trouble didn't arrive in one big explosion. It came like creeping fog, sliding through cracks, settling into corners of my life long before I realized how thick it had become. It started with the family group chat. Right after the startup symposium, when articles began circulating about promising student innovations, I dropped a link in the chat, just a tiny announcement about RootFlow making finalist. I didn't expect confetti emojis. Just something. Mom read it. Lottie liked the message. Dad ignored it completely. 5 minutes later, Mom posted a photo of Lottie at a corporate gala, wearing a champagne-colored dress, cocktail glass raised, her caption glowing, "Our shining star." My message floated above it like a typo. Then Mom texted privately, "Sweetheart, don't get discouraged. Your project looks cute." Cute. I felt the word land on me like lint light but insulting. I didn't respond, but it carved another line inside me, one I knew I'd revisit later. The next hit came from an unexpected angle, my father's network. A week after the symposium, Jonah told me he'd reached out to a logistics investor who seemed interested until he wasn't. "He said your dad warned him," Jonah muttered, tapping rapidly on his phone. "Something about you being unpredictable and your project being structurally immature. He even said you were emotional." I felt my stomach drop. Emotional. My father used that word. The way surgeons use scalpels. Precise. Cutting. Final. "That doesn't make sense," Priya said. "Why would he sabotage his own daughter?" I didn't know the answer then, but I would. A few days later, I got another blow. My university emailed to tell me I'd been selected as Student Innovator of the Year, and I'd deliver a short speech at commencement. My hands shook holding the email. It was the kind of news families framed. I sent it to the group chat. No one answered. Hours later, Dad sent a single line. "Good. Make sure your remarks reflect well on our family." Reflect well on our family. Like my achievements were raw materials for their brand. That night, unable to sleep, I scrolled back through years of messages, holidays, birthdays, celebrations. It became obvious. The Langford family wasn't a family. It was a company, and I was the unpaid intern. The fourth blow came disguised as an invitation. 2 days before graduation, a reservation link popped up in the group chat. Dinner for Natalie Aurelia on the river. Dress appropriately. When I clicked it, the host greeting said, "The Langford family, Edward, Vivian, Charlotte." My name wasn't listed. Not a mistake. A statement. I texted Lottie privately. "Why isn't my name on the reservation?" She replied immediately. "Don't overthink it. Probably formatting." Formatting. I stared at the word until it blurred. That was what I was to them. A line they could delete. Later that night, I overheard something that changed everything. Mom and Dad were on speakerphone with a donor from one of their charity circles. Their voices carried from the hallway into my room. "She's doing some tech thing," Mom said. "Not stable, not polished." Dad added, "We've decided to distance her from the Langford brand. It's better for the family narrative." Narrative. Brand. Not daughter. Never daughter. The next afternoon, I met Marcus Hale in a glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown Boston. Papers spread across the table. Proposed acquisition terms. Equity distributions. Projected expansion plans. The numbers made my chest tighten 7 figures. Clean. Legal, mine. But it was something Marcus said that hit even harder. "Years ago," he said, flipping through documents, "I pitched to your father's fund. He dismissed me. Said people like me lacked profile." I blinked, surprised. "I'm sorry," I murmured. Marcus shook his head. Don't be. That rejection built this company. And now, the person he undervalues most is about to become one of my strategic directors. I tried to breathe through the shock. Then he leaned back, studying me. Just curious, did you tell your family about this? I laughed. No, they wouldn't care. He nodded slowly. Maybe not now, but trust me, at some point they will. His words stuck with me long after our meeting ended. I didn't know it then, but they were prophecy. The next escalation came fast. Dad called me unexpectedly. His tone was as flat as ever. I talked to the dean, he said. We want to make sure your graduation dinner is dignified. Please don't mention your little project tonight. It's not the right audience. Little project. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles whitened. Dad, I said quietly, you don't even know what it is. He paused. I know enough. We hung up without a goodbye. Another wound. Another line carved deep. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife further, a letter arrived from a law office addressed to me. Inside was a request for signature, documentation needed to finalize adjustments to the Langford Family Trust. No explanation, no courtesy, just a line near the bottom stating that certain dependents were being reclassified. Reclassified. That night, sitting at my desk with the city lights flickering through blinds, my chest tightened so hard I had to sit still until the dizziness passed. I wasn't being cut out because I failed. I was being cut out because I succeeded too quietly for their control, too independently for their comfort. And yet, I swallowed it. All of it. But the silence was stacking inside me like dynamite. And one dinner, one envelope would be the spark. The final stretch before graduation felt like walking through a house where every floorboard was wired to explode. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself. And the hits didn't slow down. 3 nights before the dinner, Lottie FaceTimed me while I was debugging a routing function on my laptop. Her face filled the screen. Perfect makeup, perfect lighting, perfect everything. Nat, quick thing, she said. Mom wants you to wear something neutral to the dinner. You know, nothing too bold. It's a classy place. I stared at her. You mean don't embarrass you? She blinked in faux confusion. Oh my God, why would you say that? You're being dramatic. Dramatic, emotional, unpredictable. Their holy trinity of insults. I ended the call mid-sentence. She texted me a passive-aggressive paragraph, which I didn't open. I swallowed the sting, but it carved deeper. 2 nights before graduation, I was in the lab printing final documents for our acquisition due diligence packet. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The printer hummed steadily, and my hands shook each time I picked up a page. Maybe from exhaustion. Maybe from adrenaline. Maybe from finally realizing I was doing something none of them had ever done, build something from nothing. Then my phone lit up. It was Mom. Natalie, sweetheart, quick update, she said as soon as I picked up. Your father and I discussed the dinner. We really want this to be a polished, private moment. Please refrain from talking about that project of yours. It's not the right setting. That project. I won an award, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Professor Ruiz nominated me. I'm speaking at commencement. Mom exhaled like I'd inconvenienced her. Of course, honey. We're proud. But tonight is family-focused. Let's not confuse things. Family-focused. At a dinner where my name wasn't even on the reservation. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. The next day, things escalated again, but this time from an angle I didn't expect. While grabbing coffee before class, I saw Mom's social media post. Couldn't be prouder of my incredible daughter Charlotte. True leadership. True grace. A photo of Lottie accepting some mid-level recognition at her firm. My award? Still ignored. Still unseen. Hours later, Lottie messaged, "Heads up, Mom wants a picture of you at dinner holding your degree so she can make a montage. But don't stress, she'll crop it nicely." Crop it. They didn't want me. They wanted a cut-out version they could control. That evening, as I was leaving campus, rain started falling light at first, then heavy enough to turn sidewalks into mirrors. I pulled my blazer over my head and sprinted toward the bus stop. That was when my phone rang again. Dad. His voice was cool, low, deliberate. Your mother and I want tomorrow night to go smoothly. Please be punctual. And do not bring unnecessary documents. My throat tightened. What documents? A beat of silence. You know what I mean. I did. He didn't know specifics, but he sensed something shifting, something he couldn't manage. My success was a threat, not to our family legacy, but to their narrative. The call ended, and I stood in the rain, drenched to the bone, chest burning. The water was cold, but my skin felt hot, like shame and clarity were competing to take over my body. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, sorting every piece of paper related to root flow term sheets, projections, licensing agreements. The city glowed in silent grids outside my window, and for the first time in my life, I felt steady. Every insult, every dismissal, every forgotten milestone, each one sat next to me, forming a neat stack of motivation. The next day, graduation day, brought a new level of cruelty. As I lined up backstage for the ceremony, I overheard two women chatting behind me. They were donors from one of Mom's circles. One whispered, "I heard the Langfords are cutting one of their daughters out of the trust for stability reasons." The other replied, "Probably the quiet one. What's her name?" "Natalie." My stomach dropped. So that was it. My family wasn't just distancing themselves, they were broadcasting it. When I walked across the stage, applause echoed through the hall. But it didn't feel like it belonged to me. It felt like a sound effect in someone else's movie. After the ceremony, Dad shook my hand like I was a business associate. Mom hugged me with stiff arms. Lottie kissed my cheek and whispered, "Don't bring up the award tonight. It'll make things awkward." Awkward? For who? I swallowed everything. Again. But something inside me clicked like a gear shifting into place. Later that afternoon, while preparing for the dinner, another message popped up. A notification. Final transfer confirmation. The acquisition was complete. Funds cleared. Everything signed. I stared at the number for several seconds, the zeros stretching across my screen like a horizon. Then I looked at their disownment letter sitting on my countertop, unsigned, unopened, untouched. I didn't know it then, but the next few hours would rewrite everything they believed about me. The calm before the explosion always feels the same. Air too still, heart too loud, silence too heavy. I pulled on my blazer, tied my hair back, straightened the folder, and walked out the door toward a dinner where they thought they'd break me. But they had no idea what I was carrying, and absolutely no idea what was coming next. Aurelia on the River always smelled like truffle butter and money. The kind of place where the floor never creaked and waiters moved like ghosts. When I walked in, the chandelier light washed everything in gold, but it couldn't disguise the cold knot tightening in my stomach. The hostess looked up. "Reservation?" "The Langford family," I said. Her polite smile faltered. She blinked at the screen. "Oh, right. They're already seated." Already. Without me. She led me through the dining room, heels tapping soft against the marble. The closer I got, the more familiar the voices became. My mother's airy laughter, my father's measured tone, Lottie's perfectly rehearsed giggle. And then I saw them. My family sat at the corner table under a halo of chandelier light, posing as if an invisible camera hovered over them. Mom waved dramatically when she spotted me, her diamond bracelet catching every reflection. "Natalie, darling, finally," she called. Dad didn't stand. He just nodded, assessing me the way he assessed quarterly reports. Lottie lifted her phone, angling it slightly, always filming, always looking for the moment that made her look good. I slid into the empty chair, the chair that didn't have a place card, the only one missing a folded napkin. A server approached immediately, placing a pristine white envelope beside my plate. Mom clasped her hands. "We have something for you. A fresh start." Lottie bit her lip like she was trying not to grin. Dad cleared his throat, signaling his rehearsed speech. "It's time we all move forward," he said. Cleanly. Professionally. Something about that phrasing, professionally, made the back of my neck tingle. I picked up the envelope. The paper was thick, heavy, expensive. Of course it was. I opened it slowly. Their eyes watched every movement. Inside was a legal disownment letter, releasing all familial obligations, severing ties, absolving them of future responsibilities. Signed by Edward Langford. Signed by Vivian Langford. Signed by Charlotte Langford. Neat. Perfect. Like the signatures themselves were proud. My chest didn't tighten. My throat didn't close. Instead, everything inside me went still, icy, steady. I folded the letter once, twice, then set it gently beside my spoon. Dad leaned back. "Well?" he asked. I met his eyes. Thank you. The words sliced the air. Mom blinked, confused. Lottie lowered her phone a fraction. You're thanking us? Lottie said, slow, like she wasn't sure she heard right. I nodded. For making things official. A flicker of something crossed. Dad's face, not guilt, not regret. Annoyance. The irritation of a man who expected gratitude for cruelty. He spoke softly, but the cold under his voice could have cracked ice. This is what's best for everyone. Natalie, you need independence. We need clarity. Clarity. Funny. I had some of my own. I reached into my bag. Slow. Quiet. Surgical. I pulled out a gray folder, sleek. Professional. Nearly identical to the ones Dad brought to board meetings. I placed it on the table and opened it toward them. The light hit the Horizon Freight Systems letterhead perfectly. Dad's jaw tightened. Mom inhaled sharply. Lottie leaned in, eyes narrowing as she read. Inside the folders sat the full acquisition agreement. Root Flow's sale. $7.4 million. My role. Director of Data Strategy and Product Integration. My equity. My signatures. Marcus Hale's signatures. My father's hand twitched. Mom swallowed hard. But when? How? You didn't tell us. You never asked, I said. Lottie's voice cracked. This is yours? All of it? Yes. Silence expanded across the table, thick and suffocating. Even the quartet in the corner slowed their playing, shifting to a softer song, the kind you'd hear at a funeral. Dad's voice came out rougher than before. You sold it without consulting us? It's my company, I said quietly. My work. His nostrils flared. Do you have any idea how this looks? I tilted my head. Yes, actually, I do. Mom leaned forward, hands trembling slightly as she reached for her wine glass. Natalie, sweetheart, we didn't know. If we had, you would have tried to stop it. I finished. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Lottie finally spoke, her voice thin. Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped. I laughed once, soft, humorless. You mean the way you helped with the symposium? Or with my award? Or with every achievement I ever had? She flinched. Good. I closed the folder, sliding it back into my bag. You can keep your letter, I said, tapping the disownment paper they'd given me. I already have mine. A cold hush fell over the table. Dad's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You blindsided us. I stood. No, you blinded yourselves. My chair scraped softly against the marble, a quieter sound than I expected, but somehow louder than a scream. As I walked away, I heard Mom's voice crack. Natalie, wait. But I didn't turn. At the entrance, the restaurant's lights reflected in the glass door. In that reflection, I saw them still sitting there, perfectly lit, perfectly broken, perfectly lost in a narrative they thought they controlled. Outside, the night air hit me sharp and clean, smelling like rain on metal. My lungs expanded for the first time all evening. My phone buzzed, emails, notifications, press alerts about the acquisition, proof, all time-stamped. I looked at the disownment envelope in my hand. For the first time, it felt light, harmless, paper pretending to hold power. I whispered to myself, it's over. But it wasn't. Not really. Because revenge doesn't roar. It whispers. And mine had only just begun. The walk back to my apartment felt different. Like the city had shifted half an inch to the left and everything finally lined up. Traffic hummed along the river. Windows glowed above me, and the air tasted cleaner than it had in years. I didn't rush. I didn't check over my shoulder. I just let the quiet settle. When I stepped inside, the first thing I saw was the folder I'd left on the counter that morning, the acquisition papers stacked perfectly beside my framed degree. For a moment, I simply stared at them. Two versions of my name. One they tried to erase. One stamped into permanence. I set their disownment letter behind the frame, not hidden, just cataloged. A footnote. Evidence of what had happened and what it cost me to walk away. My phone buzzed once. A message from Lottie. We didn't mean for it to be like that. Can we talk? I watched the dots appear, then disappear, then appear again. It felt like watching a ghost try to claw its way back into the room. Another buzz. Mom, this time. We're trying to understand. Please don't make this harder. A third. Dad, I think you're overreacting. Call when you calm down. Calm. The word almost made me laugh. I placed the phone face down. Not out of anger, out of clarity. The kind that doesn't need validation or explanation or noise. I brewed coffee, the rich smell filling the small kitchen. Steam curled upward, fogging the window just enough to blur the city lights into soft halos. The warmth spread through my hands, my chest, my jaw easing tension I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. And then I opened my laptop. Emails from Horizon waited. A calendar invite from Marcus. A message from Professor Ruiz. Opportunities lined up like dominoes ready to fall in my direction. But one email stood out, an automated note I'd almost forgotten I set months ago. Scheduled release. Route flow public announcement 9 a.m. tomorrow. Press included. Credit unavoidable. Narrative irreversible. I leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath me. They thought their letter erased me. But tomorrow morning? Tomorrow, the world would see exactly who they cut loose. And that's the kind of silence that destroys reputations. Not with shouting, not with vengeance, just with truth, timed perfectly. My revenge wasn't fire. It was daylight. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, the one they underestimated, the one they talked over, the one they tried to shrink into silence, then you understand why this story matters. What happened to me wasn't just betrayal, it was revelation. And it's only the beginning. So if any part of this hit home, subscribe and stay with me. There's so much more they never expected me to tell. And trust me, the next chapter? It gets even colder.